Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on accelerating revenue growth by eliminating data silos. I'm Brian O'Leary, Executive Director of the Book Industry Study Group, and I'm happy to have you here today. We're fortunate to have Sebastian Mayeres, who's CEO of K&K Software, to present today on this topic, which is critical to our thinking about the supply chain, as well as in our considerations for our workflow committee and even metadata. The notion of connecting across what have been disparate data pools in the industry is something that I think will shape our conversation going forward, particularly as we look at what the next supply chain for the book business looks like. And I'm really glad to welcome Sebastian today to kind of jumpstart our thinking about it. Sebastian, welcome.
Thank you very much, Brian, and thanks for having me. And hello to everyone on the webinar here today. As Ryan said, my name is Sebastian. I'm the CEO of K&K Software. I'm basically having the joy to almost work my entire life with the publishing and media industries. I'm with the industry for about 20 years now. I have done lots of projects in different types of publishing houses across the world, primarily across Europe and the US, but some of them also in Asia, not too many, but my focus is definitely on publishing within the European and US-centric focused area. I'm talking to you about the data silos today, as Brian already announced it. And one of the key things we're always hearing is, what is the problem with data silos? So, what is so bad about them? And the problem with the data we have today is not the amount of data we have, but it's the problem that basically everything we're doing nowadays is generating data. Things we're doing on our end, or you as a publisher, you're doing on your end is generating data. Your customers are generating data with you, and even your competitors are generating data you may want to use. But the problem is that they are all being used within different systems. And that means they're usually getting trapped in those systems. And by doing this, they're becoming silos. So we can't really, make the full use out of our data we have. And, we cannot move ourselves into a proactive position where we say, let's use our data in order to underline our gut feeling and make business decisions based out of that. And the most common reasons why, or at least what we have discovered so far, is why data silos exist are basically three different areas. The three different areas are, the organizational structure for once. That is something which we very often see, that data is not really being an integral part of management. So, oftentimes we're talking about having CTOs there, CIOs, and those type of positions within an organization, but that often is focused on applications and basically how to make sure that applications are connected to each other. But what we're trying to enforce more and more into the thinking of the publishing houses and the media industry in general is maybe it's about time that we stop thinking about applications and start thinking about the data we want to produce or we want to generate with those applications first, and how we want to manage it before we make the decision of choosing the specific application. So one of the things what we are discovering is when we talk to our customers is, they're usually, if I ask you on the webinar here, like, are you a Microsoft based company, or are you more into the Apple region? Most of the people are already knowing this because they decided for a platform, and therefore they decided for, how to manage their application schema. But when it comes to, when it comes to the question about what kind of application platform are you using, that you usually see lots and lots and lots of different applications being used with not a common data management below it. So data really needs to become a management position in the sort of that you manage, or that you think about, maybe even potentially the data first approach I was talking about. Also, you can make this as goals and priorities within the different departments to make sure, making sure that, that data is not being trapped. And you can help by, limiting the amount of bureaucracy you have, or restricting, access to certain data sets. That is something which is for the sake of data silos, not helpful at all to actually limit the use of data by building bureaucracy around those things. So this is something which we basically found in every company out there, that it has a lot to do with the organizational structure, and that's basically even when you think about digitalization, it always is not about the technology and the processes usually, but it's also about the people, living those processes and working on it. So we need to make sure that we make data a very important topic within the different organizations. But it's also, concerning company culture, right? If you think about your publishing house, you may have different departments where they don't really work very closely with other departments for whatever reason. Could have multiple reasons, and that is something which we need to break apart here as well. That's because if you think only within your department, usually the data is being trapped in that department either by the fact that the department does not grant access to the data for other departments out there, or systems are being used primarily or solely in that specific department, which is trapping the data and is not being linked to other services or other applications out there. Nowadays, it's very easy for single departments to make software decisions on their own with the various cloud offerings which are out there. It's so easy to just install. It's not even necessary, but to sign up for a software and start using it without letting IT know about this. So that's what we call shadow IT, and that's what is a big cause on generating data silos actually. So those are the things from an organizational but also cultural standpoint, which we find very, very often in publishing houses, which we are dealing with. And then, of course, as you could imagine, that it's the other, third big topic is technology here. Lots and lots of times we do have still old legacy systems out there, which are actually running quite fine. The problem is managing those systems, because you get the knowledge about those systems is getting slimmer and slimmer. But it's also a very big problem with those old legacy systems, that they are very, very hard to interface, especially when it comes to the newer interface technology like APIs and such. You got proprietary technology out there, which I just described, which is usually very, very hard to interface. And then there's no technology platform at all. As I just described, everybody of you knows are you a Windows shop and you're running on the Windows machines, or are you running on Mac machines? But the fact is, what is your business software approach? Which platform are you running in? Do you run on a platform at all? And then it's the mentioned shadow IT, which I talked about. That is something which is very critical nowadays, that we have to get, we need to monitor this to make sure we're not, generating additional data silos on top of the old data silos we already have, from the old proprietary legacy systems there. So what we have nowadays, that is a typical, environment which we are usually dealing with. It's lots of different systems, some of them are connected, some are not connected. Data is being duplicated across the board, because interface technology nowadays also means you're not really, using the same data, but oftentimes you're duplicating the data to actually make sure all systems are, having access to the data. So, if we summarize all of that, it's basically, and that's a quote which I found, it's very on point here, is that the reality is that specifically within the publishing industry, is that most businesses do have the data, and they are data rich. So that means we are at the point where we can make data-driven decisions. But the problem is we have very, very poor insights about our data, and we don't even know where the data is stored, how the data is structured, and how we can, merge those data together to actually make sophisticated data-driven business decisions. It's actually a very interesting book if somebody is into the book industry and into the book business, right? That's something I could suggest for you starting to read on the big data topics. It's very interesting. That is just the next slide here is just a little bit of so that you're not only thinking I'm saying those things, but that is a study by PwC. And what I only focus on today is that the data availability. So the study here was around how ready are the different industries for the use of artificial intelligence. And of course, for the use of artificial intelligence, you do need lots and lots of data. And as you can see, this numbers here are specifically for the publishing and media industry, that the data availability within the publishing and media space is actually very high. So we are at the very, very good starting point to actually start using the data and, with the help of artificial intelligence, make more use out of it. And I can give you the link to and it's even on the slide here. So if you're interested in that analysis, I highly recommend looking at it. So why are data silos bad? We already talked about it a little bit, but let me point out a couple of things, because it's just more than just frustrating for the IT department. That's what I'm trying to say here, and it's really, and this is one of the biggest topics we're seeing, is like the inhibited productivity, but also the bad decision making. If you think about, and maybe not at your publishing house, but I still know a whole bunch of publishing houses when it, for example, comes to the budgeting process. And the budgeting process usually starts with, sending out various Excel spreadsheets to the different departments. You're gathering data, and so that you can combine those data and actually, start the budgeting process. And that's just one of the many examples which are out there. What I mean by long-lasting data gathering, analysis. If you want to have certain views on certain titles, what are the post calculations of your book? How successful really was it? Did we make money on it? A lot of publishing houses we're dealing with don't have the time to actually do those post calculations on all of their titles, because it takes so much time, it consumes so much time to actually get all the data together, because you got your publishing system, you got your financial system, and so on and so forth, and you're trying to collect all those data to make the analysis of your certain titles, and therefore it's only done for the most important titles, where there's a lot of money spent and also a lot of money lost on the titles where you don't do those analysis. So this is just one of the examples that is why data silos are bad, because it's a waste of time for your people, and it also leads to demotivating your staff, because it's simply, if something is a manual and tedious process, nobody really wants to do it, but nonetheless it is important. The other thing is data duplication. So you have data in all kinds of various systems. And let aside the fact that this data needs to be stored somewhere, so you're actually paying for the storage. Storage fees nowadays are not that much, but if you think about the data you're producing today, and doubling that amount into 2 or 3 different systems, it actually, you may need to take that into consideration for the cost of your IT infrastructure. But also, data duplication leads to the fact that if you duplicate data and not keep track of where you have duplicated it, that data can get out of sync. So in one system, and everybody of us knows that, including me, myself, and with our organization, sometimes you have just analysis where you think, oh, you know what? I don't really believe that analysis. Those numbers seems to be off. And that usually happens if there's duplicated data being used to run those analysis views, and then they're not up to date, right? So that can happen. And I already talked about discourage collaborative work. Absolutely, right. If it's tedious to get access to the data, you have to reach out to your colleague quite often. And can you send me the data set of this? Can you send me the numbers for that? Can you send me the spreadsheet of this? It's just not really helpful for a good collaborative work environment. And then, of course, we all know that it's like no one version of the truth. The analysis view I was just talking about, well, your data looks different than mine, or your KPIs look different than mine, because they may be running on potentially the same data, but probably not, because it's in one system the data is more accurate or more up to date than in the other system. Nonetheless, you're running analysis maybe out of both of those systems, and therefore that you may be producing different versions there. And that is, bad decision making. That is one of the most important things. Is currently, all of us, we do have a very good gut feeling. about at least certain things of our business. But what I just described about why not make a post calculation on all of our titles? Well, just it's simply because it takes too long. So maybe we don't even know that we're making bad decisions. And what we're trying to do nowadays with all the data we have, we do want to make data-driven business decisions, which are not only based on our gut feeling. Of course, I'm not saying that we can replace our decision-making with an artificial intelligence, but it can definitely help us to actually make more data-driven decisions and therefore more precise business decisions. And that is something which we really need to start doing. If we don't have the full picture of something, if we don't have access to all the data we have of the different data silos, we are sometimes just not being able to see the bigger picture. Right. Sometimes we think based on certain data we have that, this is a good suggestion going forward. But if we haven't looked at the data holistically, that's maybe just a small fraction of what's happening with our titles currently for whatever reasons. And therefore we do actually make potentially a wrong decision. Right. So those are the factors that we have to make sure we are addressing, because this is why data silos are bad. We need to have the right data at the right time through the right technology in order to make good decisions. So what can we actually do to, we identified, what's happening with the data today. We also talked about why data silos exist and why they're bad. But what can we do to actually get rid of those data silos? Right, and those are the three different areas which we have identified so far, what we all can do. So first of all, as I said before, it always also have to do with human beings, and we need to work collaboratively with each other to be more productive. And if you got this departmental thinking, if you got the thing of, oh no, that's my data and nobody else is supposed to be touching that because it's just the data I created, that is hindering exactly the deconstruction of the data silos. So what can we do in that area in the sense of change of culture? That's a lot. We're always saying we need to change the culture in order to move ahead. But here's just a couple of helpful elements in that case. So a lot of times, and I said this before, is that data is not really a topic. We're talking about systems, we're talking about processes, but I've never heard an organization, at least so far, start to talk about, okay, let's start with the data and start building a view from a data perspective and then decide what kind of systems do we want to attach with that. So that is something, and I mean, we don't all have to do it to the very extent, but at least we have to make your organization aware of that data is already an important topic, and it will be even more important, going forward. And once people start to understand that and starts to understand that this is something also management thinks about, it of course automatically is being, deployed, or this thinking is deployed more and more into the department. So that this is something which you of course can do from a management perspective. Also, communicating the benefits. What is good about, sharing data? Why should we all do this? Explaining the problems of data silos to your organization. And of course, some commitment from the management that we say, well, this is one of our corporate goals, maybe to get a better understanding of the data we have nowadays and what we can do with it. And also understand what data we're currently missing and what we could do and what with the data would once we have it. So if you start, putting this commitment into the organization that this is something important for you, it will help, change the thinking of the people a little bit in that area. And then, of course, from a technology perspective, there's two additional things to that. The first thing is centralizing the data. As I talked about the data first instead of applications, but also what is your data platform? Do you have a data platform? What software platforms are you using? Is the data platform open? Can you put external data into this platform? Can you centralize your data storage somehow? So those are things you should be asking yourself going forward from a data centralization aspect, because for the analysis and for artificial intelligence, we do need as much centralized data as possible. in order to make actually the business or the data-driven business decisions. And then, of course, one of the things we're always talking about is, integrating the different systems. And with integrating the different systems, I don't mean like build another interface to another application. When we connect systems intelligently, that doesn't mean that data is being reproduced, right? That means we do have a centralized data storage platform where different systems are using the same set of data, and not different systems are communicating the data with each other. So that is something which I will be going into a little bit more detail in a couple of slides here. So the first thing from a technology standpoint of view, centralizing the data, right? So if you think about centralizing data, and that is something, so that is something which we're seeing all across the board, that we need to, and you probably know this, so I'm not telling you something new, but like if you look at the traditional business model, which is pretty linear, right? So you have your product and you're trying to market that product through various channels. And usually your customer buys this product one time, and then your customer is off. Throughout the last couple of years, we saw that it's becoming more and more important that we're basically walking away from the product centric to a more customer centric approach in that area. So instead of focusing businesses on getting product to the market and selling as much of these as possible, what we need to think about is that how can we make sure we are helping the needs of our customers. So we need to put the customer in the middle. So in that case, if it's not a one-time sell anymore, and it's more like a circular business model, is where we have to think about, okay, we sold the product to our customer, but what else can we offer? Nowadays, through the online subscription services out there, you can actually add a lot of benefits. For example, if you're having book clubs, if you're running online platforms, and you want to give customers access to your archive, or the backlist, or you're giving the customer access to an extended search capability, which saves the customer time, for example. So your customer is not purchasing something one time anymore, but you should think about how can we make sure we're staying in touch with our customers, and then we are actually, it's I don't know if it's that hard to read, but if you think about this, it's an ongoing change of product configuration. That is what we have to think about, and with that, we have endless opportunities to stay connected with our customers. So instead of seeing the single sale, more indulge the idea of a long-time customer or long-life customer relationship, right? So that is something we have to think about, but we only can do that if we have enough data to analyze so that we can present the correct or present a good product for our customers, and also to offer the right things to our customers at the right time. For example, it's an example I'm using quite often, but the Financial Times. The Financial Times, it's automatically having a service that if they, through geolocation, track you at an airport, they will automatically, through AI, shrink or condense the article you're reading, because they assume you don't have so much time. So you want to just quickly plow through a couple of articles. And for that, for example, I would actually be paying extra money to actually have that happen. And you can think about all kinds of various other things. So it's having the right solution for the right customer for the right time. So that is something we need to definitely think about. So, how could a potential solution look like this? And specifically when we talk about customers. So in that case, what nowadays is possible out there with a whole bunch of solutions, but you got to start thinking about it, is that first of all, you need to make sure you're running a platform, you're running with software with have lots and lots and lots of connectors to it. Right. And I'm not talking about, standard interfaces, but already pre-built interfaces. You don't want to build, standard interfaces from scratch. If you want to have a connector to Salesforce, it's already there. If you want to have another connector to Oracle, Microsoft, there are solutions out there, there are data platforms out there, which nowadays have those connectors up and running, and you just got to use them. So, that is one of the first cases that you need to start collecting the data from a whole bunch of different data sources. And that is, and then the next step is, which we call the unification process. That's actually, a pretty tough part of it, because you need to think about, you're getting now different data streams from different sources, and you need to somewhat match them together. And as we think about our different systems, the item number in system A may be a different item number on system B. So that is something, of course, we need to take care. Customer number on a web shop may be a different customer in your backend system somewhere. So we need to think about when we collect all the data, that we need to map, merge, and match those data sets. So that is something which is very you have to do this, but this is something where also artificial intelligence already can help you with it. And then, of course, the next part is, once you condensed all the data, and once you centralized all the data, and potentially not all the data, they're still okay if you have certain sets of data in the various applications. But for example, customer data, product data, and those type of informations, they need to be centralized in order actually to make good business decisions. And then once you have those data being stored centrally, you can actually start to actually use that data to gain more insights. And that could be done through, normal BI analysis, generating specific business analysis views, but also use artificial intelligence and machine learning to actually, find potential mixtures of data in the system, so that you can see, what have we been missing from a human being standpoint. We're thinking about, certain things, but maybe there are different patterns in the data, which is telling us that, we also need to think about specific other things. Or people who always were purchasing product A also were looking on Google for, how can I get this product online or something like that, which then may, tell us that, we may have to think about an online platform version of this specific product or something like that. And then, of course, what you can do once you have the data centralized, and that you can start having actions being taken based on that. For example, of what kind of channel of engagement do we want to use for our customers? So what we're essentially trying to do is we're trying to generate the golden record of our customers. So having a centralized view, and this is just an example for customer specific data, but we also can think about product specific data, and basically all kinds of other data we're already generating to actually generate us those golden records for this specific type of areas. And we're now focusing just on the customer side of things, but that is how something like a customer dashboard could look like from our way of thinking. So of course, you see at Patty Melendez, she's a project manager. She has a pretty high engagement score down here. On the lower left-hand side, her engagement score is at 86. She has currently 36 activities with us. Her lifetime sales are $554. The last purchase was about $160. So there's, some room to be covered up there. But this is something like which we can start generating if we start collecting the data from different systems. And what you see here is a condensed view of the golden record we stored somewhere on a centralized data storage, where we have data from the web shops, we have data from her maybe browsing history on our website, we have data from marketing campaigns where we sent her emails and she was opening certain emails and clicked on certain landing pages. And for example, you see, if you go to the next one, the timeline in that case is basically a little bit of what I was referring to. So what has she been doing? So we're collecting the data from marketing automation now. So did she open the email? What was the click-through rate? What kind of landing pages did she specifically go to, and how much time did she spend on our website? So you see lots and lots of data being collected from the different systems here and being used to actually generate a holistic golden record view on the customer. And there are quite some systems out there which can actually help doing this. And once you start collecting those data, and once you start to map and merge and enrich those data sets, you can actually then one of a sudden start, start putting some artificial intelligence around this. And even in that area, a lot of systems out there are already having pre-configured machine learning algorithms on top of that, for example, to predict customer churn. Right. One of the things which is, of course, every business is somewhat more and more going to subscription business as well. Right. So, churn is something which is a very interesting topic. And that's just basically a view here, which is put on top of the data. It's a machine learning model which helps you to predict churn, and based on various different factors. I listed some factors down here on the lower right hand side. So the number of days between the last activities occurring to the end of the subscription, this is a pretty large factor. And believe it or not, it's also a little longer a customer has subscribed to something, the higher the possibility is there in a way. It's pretty straightforward thinking, but it's indeed one of the biggest factors out there. It's like how long does the customer already has the subscription out there, and then the number of days from the first subscription activities that occurred, and so on and so forth. But this is just one view of certain things you can do with already pre-existing machine learning models, which you can apply to centralized data sets once you have them. But there's a whole bunch of other things out there which you could also do if we just talked about the churn prediction, but also let's talk about the spending prediction, right? Let's think on the positive side of things here. It's like, how much additional upselling potential does the customer have? What is the customer interested, so that I offer him or her the right product, the right service at the right amount of time. I'm sorry, I was skipping too far forward here. There we go. Let's go back to that. So that's about the spending prediction. But then if you think about, next best activity. So what's the next best activity I should be doing with our customer or potentially prospect? So is sending him another email doing the trick, or should we be actually reaching out to him or her? Should we be calling her? Should we be inviting her to a certain event? So that's something where machine learning models can also help you. Again, once you have the data, you need to have a certain set amount of data to actually have those models be capable of doing something with it. Data-driven timing. Should I reach out to that person again, or should we wait another week, or should we wait for a specific time during the day to actually create this pop-up message within an app or something like that? Right, that is very, very crucial timing. If you hit the next message during working hours, they probably are not going to look at it. During lunch break, that's already something which could be more appealing to the customer, even in the afternoons, right? If you know that your customer is into sports, so they probably are not looking at their phones right after work, because that's usually where they hit the gym and those type of things. So those are areas which you can include into your data-driven business decisions. Let aside talking about scoring. I think scoring, we all heard about it enough. So, score a potential prospects until it hits a certain threshold, in the sense of like, this prospect opened the email, clicked on a link, and at some point you think they're sales worthy, and then you try to pursue them with emails or next best actions. But before that, you have to wait a little, because the potential prospect is not sales worthy, for example. And then of course, integrate all kinds of different data sources, and that just basically mentioning that again. So those are things which once you have the data centralized, once you got rid of the data silos, which you can already do out there with pre-trained, pre-configured machine learning algorithm, where you don't really have to spend lots of money on to actually get those systems up and running. And then, of course, we talked about, centralizing data. We talked about interfacing the data. So that's something what we can offer at the moment. We call it the K&K platform. What we offer basically is an app store for publishing houses and media companies. So what we offer is, basically a little bit like an app store where you can think, oh, I need a royalty calculation module, or I need something within the area of editorial office. I need something within the subscription area. So those are basically all kinds of different areas which holding a certain set of functionality, accounting and all kinds of stuff like that. But the interesting part when I was talking about integration, of course, you could now say, well, okay, we got something like this already, which probably is true. But then those different systems are interfaced with each other in a way that they are duplicating the data over and over and over. You have customer data on your web shop, you have customer data in your ERP system, in your backend systems, you have customer data in your financial systems. And they're all being, reproduced data instead of being the same data record. So what we have within the K&K platform here is something that is, one data model. So all the different apps we do use, they communicate with each other, but they're all being based on the same data set. So that means if you have a customer record, the customer record sits in the data model, and the different apps are using this specific data model. The good thing about it, it's not like, we're a company at K&K where we are very, very open, and we're very, very transparent with what we're doing, but also transparent and open from a technology standpoint. So first of all the data which is stored in the data model is completely your data. We don't have access to it. We're not doing anything with it. You can already then use that data model, which I described before, and we do have already pre-trained AI and machine learning models, which are helping you to actually get to the point of making quicker business decisions based on this, the centralized data model we have here. And then, of course, which to me is very important is that this data platform is open. That means you're not bound to data which is generating within those apps we're offering, but you can also have your Salesforce link to it, your web shops, your SAP solutions, your Oracle databases. So you can use that data model as a centralized data storage, even if those are products which are not within the K&K application suite, basically. And last but not least, a little bit about us as K&K. Why do we think, from what I was telling you before, why do we think, we're good next to all of the technology we were talking about? But that is something which we're only focusing on the publishing and media industry, and that for more than 30 years. So all of our clients worldwide are primarily publishers, media companies across, different branches of that industry. And, that is something which we're indulging. And that's also why we're doing this today in here, to actually start, thought leadership. We're really trying to be engaged within the industry to make sure we can help somewhat prepare the industry, talk about digitalization, help moving that industry forward, so that we're able to, produce more titles within that industry to be able to, afford technology or make technology affordable to the whole industry to help drive that industry forward. And with that, Brian, I would say, let's see if we have a couple of questions already, and what the audience is thinking about that.
Thank you, Sebastian. And we do have some questions to get us started, and I'm sure we'll get some more as we go forward. So one of the things that you said at the outset was that, you described the importance of organizational structure, company culture, and existing technology as both enablers and impediments in trying to make data a management priority. You've worked with probably dozens, if not more than that, of different companies across the world. How do you work with management to get them to shift from data being maybe a topic, but not necessarily a priority, to making it a priority that they can support and that will drive change in an organization?
That's a very good question. It's similar to what I would say is the current HR topic. right? So HR, a lot of times, at least when throughout my experience when I was dealing with management, different board of directors and such, is that oftentimes there was nobody primarily dedicated also to HR. Same thing we're seeing here is that, of course, we do have CTOs nowadays, but oftentimes because there's technology changes are coming quicker and quicker nowadays. So there's already lots of stuff to do for the IT departments, for the CTOs of the world. But we have to make sure that the data topic is covered somewhere in that management area, at least to the point that it's definitely needs to be on the topic list. And we need to make sure that the employees also understand that data is a topic which is important for the management, because then they automatically start thinking about the data on their own. So if we make data a priority and maybe even data centralization a corporate goal, then what the middle management usually, if you think about from a company goal perspective to the departmental goal perspective, and then potentially to the individual goal perspective, they need to be aligned. And if you have data centralization, for example, as a topic, as a corporate goal, the departments and therefore the people will automatically follow that. That's something which, awareness is often the most important first step.
And you mentioned in terms of impediments with respect to technology, shadow IT in a variety of different ways, but maybe talk a little bit more about the kinds of things that are typically shadow IT. I mean, I think in some cases it's individual employees bringing technology to the workplace because it solves their problem, correct?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I would define with shadow IT. So I recently had the case where we were talking to a client and we were trying to identify all their system landscape basically. And then, the IT was saying, yeah, just talk to us and we just fill out a spreadsheet and we tell you all the systems we're using. But then once we start to actually interview the different departments, just like, people were using Workfront and all those kinds of like cloud systems which are out there, which sometimes doesn't even cost anything, right? And they're using them those type of systems, which isn't bad by itself, but they're using the system to organize themselves, to organize the department, scheduling something, for example. But usually, if the IT doesn't know anything about it, it's not that those systems aren't that you can't interface them, but if you don't know about them, then you're producing data, potentially very valuable data, but not letting anybody know that the data is out there, and therefore you can't ingest this data and use it.
Do you recommend, particularly when you work with newer clients, resources that are useful to become better informed? Are there books, articles, consultants? I think you used a PwC example as a consultant, but also vendors where you can have conversations so that, because I imagine this process is not like you show up, implement a system, and then teach people how to do data. It's really an interactive and iterative, repetitive process.
Yes, and sometimes even vice versa. So sometimes we don't even think about implementing anything. We're just start to thinking about data as a first step, in the sense of like, as I described, it's not that the publishing houses we're talking to, they actually have very, very good amount of data and useful data sets already. The problem is that they're convoluted, they're everywhere. And we have to think about, what data do we actually have? What can we do with the data we already have, but we're potentially currently not doing because we don't know that we have the data, and also maybe what data is currently missing. And once we identified what data is currently missing, we then can think about a system or technology which can help to actually produce those data. So, marketing automation, that's something what people are talking a lot about these days. And because that is usually helping that not only to communicate with the client, but producing certain amount of data sets which are useful to help up and cross-sell, to help identify the next best action and those type of things. And this is why marketing automation, let aside the automation piece of it, of course, but this is why marketing automation is so important at the moment. It generates data which we hadn't had in the past.
And you mentioned a book in your presentation. I don't know if you've Did you find that to be like a particularly good resource for you, or?
Yeah, I'm reading a lot of books. In fact, I have to say I listen to a lot of books because I mostly do that. But I think that's a very good book if you want to get started on data. It's written in a way that also non-tech people can understand, and that's what I'm always about. Is even though I'm a technology enthusiast, I don't think we need to make it awkwardly complicated from a wording and wording perspective, and that is a book which helps to plant the thought of why it is important to think about data also on a bigger scale. And it's called Big Data by Bernard Marr. I can send a link later on today, or you include this in the follow-up or something like that.
If you, that would be great. But if you can also type it into the chat.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
As long as you select everyone, which means that folks beyond me.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I'll give you a minute to do that, and then I'll ask a follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
And Beth says thank you for sharing that information.
Absolutely. So I guess I think everybody should have it now.
Thank you. The recipe that you had, I mean, kind of your silo busting recipe, involved three things. One was to change culture. The second was to centralize data, potentially, for the first time in a business. And then the third is to integrate systems intelligently. Just as an observer, that seems incredibly hard for particularly starting with culture, because book publishers in general are pretty well established. They're not kind of from scratch. As a company focused on serving the book business, I guess a two-part question: how do you go about making that tough change happen? And are there specific things that book publishers should be aware of as they get started down this the silo busting process?
So first of all, I don't think there is the recipe to help from a cultural standpoint perspective. Every publisher, I mean, they're doing similar things, but every publisher also from a cultural perspective is different. So you have to enforce the change and in different ways. But the little step by step, I would say, is always a good thing to do at the beginning. It doesn't need to be, you need to completely rip everything apart and then primarily focus on data. But I think if you start with, as I said, making this a management topic as well, and therefore making people aware, a lot of people, and that's absolutely okay, right? A lot of people who are working there, on an everyday work-life basis, they don't know, or they may not know why data is important nowadays. So that's something why they don't think about it. And this is why oftentimes it's still said, oh no, this is my data. I have my little Access database with my customer list in it, and it just belongs to me because those are the important customers of ours, or something like that, right? But that is really something, if those people would understand that sharing the data is way more beneficial than keeping it trapped in a silo, that would already help. So I think it's you definitely need to start talking about data, and then not saying that the magic will happen automatically, but the moment you make people aware of that, it is an important topic. That's something we're putting onto our timeline, which we want to work on this topic, and we want to centralize as much as possible. Then they will start thinking about and start learning about more about data from their perspective on. But yes, indeed, changing the culture is by far one of the hardest things. Yes.
And I think that under the second bullet, if change culture is the first, centralizing data is the second. One of the things you pointed out is it's data first, not apps first.
Yes.
And I think that's worth spending a little bit of time on, because I think people do tend to go to the app or the functionality first rather than looking at data structures.
Absolutely correct. And my example is always, every publisher where I go to, they know if they are using Windows machines and Mac machines, but almost no publishers are knowing their data platform, because they simply, you think about problems and then you start to try to solve those problems by throwing technology at them. And then, of course, there's tons of applications out there nowadays, which are perfectly fine in solving some of the problems. But again, then they solve the problem in a specific area and they keep it siloed. So the correct approach from my perspective would be the data first approach. So think about the data first. What is our problem with our customers? And then talk about the problems with the customers, and then think about, okay, what data is involved in those problem solving? And then you can actually go out and do the shopping, because the applications nowadays, once you have decided for a centralized data storage solution, and usually the modern apps, the modern backend systems, they can connect to those centralized data storages. You just need to have one. And this is something where a lot of publishers have not made up their decision, because in fact, a lot of publishers don't even know that there are different platforms out there. For example, there is an open data initiative where Microsoft, Adobe, and SAP basically partnered up and saying, we want to get rid of those data silos. So they already have this open platform with where you can see the customer data being stored from SAP, Adobe, and Microsoft, and those type of things. But not so many people do know about this.
Yeah, the Open Data Initiative is essentially an agreement on standards for writing and retrieving information, correct?
Correct, yeah. And making sure you are having that centralized data storage. So not only being we're not talking about standard APIs, so to say, right? The interfaces, pre-notices, but making sure the data is structured and stored in a way that it can be shared across the different platforms, even though it may not be created in SAP or it may not be created in Adobe and stuff like that.
Yeah, but BISG is just finishing a two-part project funded by the Mellon Foundation, in which we looked at open access data analytics, and the ODI initiative is an important piece of that. It's not necessarily just the case that we would use SAP or Microsoft as a solution, but rather that it's a widely understood way to read and write data.
Yeah.
You talked, and this may be a harder question to answer in the context of book publishing, but you talked about moving from product-centric to customer-centric. But there are many different views within book publishing about who is the customer. So if you look at a trade publisher, is it the intermediary, like a distributor? Is it the retailer? Is it the ultimate reader? And systems are probably better set up for communicating to intermediaries, like a distributor or a retailer, and not so much to an end reader. I mean, how do you think about this when it comes to book publishing? Is your customer list a list of retailers or intermediaries, or could it be something else?
For me, it could be way more than that. I think we talk about ERP systems and CRM systems too much, especially when it comes to CRM. We're always saying the customer relationship management, and then you get always the question about, like, who is the customer? And so I think it's a very, very good question you have there. I think we should, and I don't want to change the word here, but if we think about it, we need to think about stakeholder management here, right? Because even as a publisher, you may have B2C customers, so you may have end customers which are buying through your web shop, so you know a little bit about them. But you also may be selling through, the bookstores of the world here. But you also have an author relationship, right? And so you really need to think about not customer relationship management, but stakeholder management or stakeholder relationship management, because you do have indeed a whole bunch of different stakeholders, which are very important, let aside, board of directors, investors and such. But also when you think about it from a customer perspective, and you're saying, I'm selling 100% through bookstores and Amazon, and therefore I don't get any customer data whatsoever. But that's a false truth, because you can make the bookshop your customer, and you need to analyze what is the amount of room I have for my books at that specific bookstore. How many people are usually visiting that bookstore throughout the day? You can get access to the point of sale systems. It's usually a little costly to get the data from those systems, but you don't need to collect them for a very, very long time. So maybe you just get a snapshot of the data and then analyze the different bookstores and what are they selling? What are the group of people the end customers, they have access to. So you can treat a bookstore basically like an end customer and say, I got this amount of shelf space. I know the layout of the bookstore. I know how many people are working there. What are, maybe even what the people are interested. Not saying the customers, but what are the people who are working at the bookstore? What topics are they interested? And because usually the topics they are interested, they're a little bit better in selling those instead of topics they're not interested. So, you're right. There are different facets to think about who are our customers. But I think especially throughout, the last 2 years, throughout COVID, we learned a lot that even if you sell a lot through bookstore or through Amazon, right, it's about time to think about, selling directly to your customers.
Well, I think the reclassification as stakeholder rather than customer management is an important one. And I think it does help the book business think through not unique, but the specific characteristics of its community.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah,
and your example also opens up the possibility for conversations around things like vendor managed inventory, where you know more about how your books are moving because you're able to look across multiple retail units, as an example.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you proposed a model toward the end about where data is essentially ingested, mapped and matched and enriched or conflated through a series of connectors. And then the ultimate thing there is a set of dashboards, some sort of insights that kind of moves you away from just being data rich to more insight rich. How much work is required to kind of create and maintain those dashboards? Are they widgets that you can just pull together, or is that is a degree of customization that you have to be committed to both creating and extending?
That's the good thing about nowadays, also with the cloud solutions out there. There, next to all the applications we can use, there's also a lot of pre-configured. I mean, let's face it. For us as the user of those machine learning algorithms, they're more or less black boxes. You can use them to actually analyze your data, and then they spit out results. And you can tweak those, but you don't necessarily need to be a data scientist to go in and try to, to tweak the neural network behind that. But you can, set certain parameters, and based on the data you feed in, it continues to learn. So indeed, it is nowadays more a commodity and a question of widgets and trying to visualize it in an appealing way so that it's being used. At least from a starting perspective. Of course, if you want to go into more detailed, deeper analysis and want to have more control about what is being analyzed with machine learning algorithms in your data set, then you would have to tweak it a little bit more. But to get yourself started to produce the first results with the machine learning algorithms, it's perfectly fine to start with the black boxes out there or with the pre-trained, pre-configured machine learning algorithms, you could say.
Great, that's really helpful. And I think if I could take one thing away from your talk today, it would be that things are connected, but not necessarily centralized, meaning that you have a single source of truth, but it may be many different single sources.
Exactly, yeah.
From your perspective, I mean, if you had one or two things that you wanted to make sure people walking out of this talk would be able to repeat to colleagues, what would they be?
I think the first thing is really stop thinking about applications first and start thinking data first, in the sense of what are we doing with the data we're producing in that environment? And that is something which, at least if it's not the first question, then make it the second question. But you got to ask yourself that question, because more and more systems are not doing the trick. It will already and always end with data silos again, and then you just have better technologies with the same bad data silos in the back again. So make data always one of the questions you ask when you go into a discovery phase of new technology, new applications. Like, what are we going to do with the data? Where can we use it? Who else might need to have access to the data? So that's something you should be thinking about. And then also, the other thing, if you start thinking about data, is really do we have a data platform? Do we want to start creating a data platform? Because it's not something which is done overnight. It will take some time and some thoughts into it to actually help starting creating a centralized data platform for you. And there's lots of different applications out there nowadays, which are all very, very good. But I would highly recommend starting thinking about a centralized data and centralized data solution. And you don't need to have all the data. That's sometimes what we're having when we help or when we consult for some of our clients is then they think everything needs to be centralized. That's not true. You need to centralize the data where the data is useful for other systems as well, like customers, title, sales history, and stuff like that. But what is the I don't know, certain financial information of certain clients, what is the payment terms of some of your clients? You don't need to centralize those data. It's perfectly fine if this data sits in your financial management system and nobody else knows about this. That's fine. But maybe something, does the customer pay on time? That could be already something which you may want to put into the centralized area. But those are the type of things I would throw out.
Good. Well, thank you very much for making the time today. I know that this is part of our ongoing conversation between BISG and K&K Software, but it's also a really timely reminder as we look at supply chain opportunities that there's a significant data part of this business that still needs to be revisited and fine-tuned, if not, in some cases, totally upgraded. So thanks for the time, and we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Take care. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.